Welcome to the Picky Girl Travels podcast. I'm Adelia Borashade. I mentioned on last week's show that I'd be sharing interviews with different women who live around the world about how they are supporting themselves while they live abroad. In case you missed that one, it was episode 5, and it was all about teaching at international schools and what you ought to know before you embark on something like that. This week's episode explores a different career option. If you've ever had dreams of working from the beach while sipping a mojito, becoming a digital nomad or a freelancer might be one way to make that dream come true. Joining me today is Ashlee Mcclimett. She is a freelance copywriter and digital marketing queen. Originally from the U.S., but currently living in my absolute most favorite place in the world, Mexico City. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, hey, yes, of course.
Now, let's talk about Mexico City. We are in a global pandemic, and you are in Mexico City. You did not go to return to the U.S. at the outset of the outbreak in the Americas.
Yep.
You want to talk about how you made that choice?
Definitely. Yes. So I will say I'm not out here completely by myself. I am in a digital nomading duo with my boyfriend. So we did make the decision together. And I would say, like, what was the biggest factor for me was we're both people who like work with projects. So when it came down to it, we were looking at the pros and cons of staying in the States, and none of our employers at that time had included like healthcare. So we were basically had like a digital nomad sort of like healthcare plan, where here was the kicker. It's amazing outside of the States, but it's like the US is on one of those short lists of countries that they like don't do a lot of coverage for. Like I think our max was 14 days. So we were actually it didn't make sense for us like economically or for our health, honestly, to stay in the States, because if we got sick on day 15, who's going to be paying for that? So we actually made the decision to when we just were coming back to Mexico, things were starting to break, but it seemed at the time safer, and we kind of were like, we don't know how long this is going to last. We'd rather try our chances in a country where we have better health care than stay in the States and then who knows what could happen. So it was actually pretty easy for us. It came down to really like dollars and cents and where we felt the safest.
And so far, you feel like that was a good move?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
And what has your experience been like going through something this big, like this once in a lifetime, but being away from family, friends?
I would have to say it's been pretty unique. Some things that you could automatically assume is I never really got homesick, but I get people sick, right? So while I might not have missed like going back to South Florida, because, oh girl, the traffic where I live was not cute. Like there is something that you feel like is missing sometimes when like you would want to like be closer to your family. But that was really the biggest push for me in terms of like what I missed the most. But my takeaways are I'm lucky enough to have a family that's like tech savvy enough. I mean, we had to take some lessons to get there, I'm not gonna lie, where we can keep in contact as much as possible through things like, God bless, like WhatsApp, like Zoom, Skype meetings and things that make things feel a little bit closer. And also I know that both of our families, it would have not been safe for us to have stayed with them. Like my boyfriend's parents are older, so they were in a greater risk category from what we heard. And my parents, my dad's a clinical pastor and my mom is a hospice nurse. So when we do stay in Florida, we stay with them. So it was either like you're staying with your at-risk side of your family, or you're staying with a family that's like in constant contact with like potentially like at-risk patients. So it was just better for everyone. It was sort of like a group family decision where we're just like, we'll love each other from afar and, we'll stick it out that way. And like, you do what you can, like for Mother's Day, you gotta just like send gifts as opposed to being able to be there and have a meal. So it's pros and cons.
How did you come to live abroad and end up in Mexico of all places?
So, when I first started my digital nomad journey, like I've seen some people do things like very differently. For me, like I'm a little bit of a scaredy cat. I'm a little bit of a planner. So, I for like the first year, even before I left like the US, I was watching pretty much like any like YouTube digital nomading channel I could find on like the countries I was interested in. So like every day, like that was like my binge watching TV. And like it was kind of really funny too, because when I had a stressful day at work, I could come home and I could just sit and dream and plan about this life I was gonna have. So I kind of was getting myself mentally prepared and also financially prepared for, I would say, anywhere from about like 6 to 8 months before I took the plunge. So there's the planning side of me, and then there's the sporadic, like, spontaneous side. So when I actually did take the leap, I was already in my profession for about a year, kind of working it as a side hustle. I had like certain like little stash of money saved up just in case. And I actually went to visit my boyfriend in Colombia during spring break because I'd gotten off, right? So I was like, all right, great, fine. And at that point, I was like at my 8 week sort of, not 8 weeks, sorry, 8 month threshold. I had gotten pretty close to where I wanted to in savings, was feeling kind of confident with the clients I had running. And he was like, so you ready to take the plunge? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I kid you not, girl. I literally emailed my letter of resignation, like sitting in like a restaurant in Medellin to my boss. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not coming back. Y'all can have my things, have whatever's in my office. Like I'm ready. Like this, like enough planning. Now it's time for action. And from what I hear from a lot of girls out there who kind of took the same path as I do, it's like pretty common. Like you sit and think about it after a while, and then finally you're like, it's time. Like you get a feeling, and then you kind of just go with it. It's sort of like that, like right before you're on a roller coaster, like before that first jump, like you just got to jump after a while.
You are 27, about to be 27.
Yes.
Okay, you went to college, and you said you had like a 9 to 5 job, but where did this idea of even becoming or being a digital nomad come from? Because, all right, I'm old enough to be your mother, so for
No,
people my age, that's not like an automatic thing that somebody jumps to. So how did you go from doing things, I guess we could say fairly traditionally, you went to school, you got a job, to saying, you know what, I'm going to ditch this and I'm going to do this other thing?
So I was working, I had been playing it safe, I would say, for a while. So I was in school and I was working as a tutor for the company that I'd started with. So I was with them for years. I was with them all through my schooling. And then when I left, I stayed, and because I just didn't know what to do next. And luckily enough, I was getting promoted through the ranks. So by the time it hit, like I was a director now at this place that I started off as just a little tutor, like trying to get like an hour here or there to be able to buy my little shoes at the end of the week. And now I was like running like one of these centers, and it was kind of a dream for me. And this moment hit when I finally got the position, got the letter, moved to my new office and everything like that. And I sat there and I was like, this ain't it.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I know that feeling.
Right?
And it's something when you're going down the path and you're doing what you're supposed to do, and when you sit there, that's not the feeling you're supposed to get. But
exactly.
I know, like having that moment, being like, okay, this ain't it.
Yes, that was basically it. And then that started my search. And I would say I had like people around me, because there's only so much, like from the outside looking in, it looks like you have everything you could ever have wanted at this moment in your life. So I would like try and have these conversations with people. And they're like, girl, bye. Like, you're doing just fine. You got your little office, got your nice view, have your own little apartment. Like, I'm going to need you to calm down. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, something's not right. So like from there, I got this book, which I would tell anyone to do. I'm actually about to start this with my sister of like her book club to take her through that process, called Designing Your Life. And like the key point of the book is like you dream big, like big, hairy, audacious dreams, like a life that you are like, I have no business living this life, but I want it. And then you plan for it, like about 5 years. So that book, I was doing a book club, I was reading it with my boyfriend at the time and doing all the action plans. And it was between like having the feeling of this ain't it and then trying to search for more. And like everything just sort of started to like unfold, like step by step. I didn't know like when I was sitting in that office and not feeling right, that I was going to be like a year or so later, like in Mexico copywriting. I just knew I couldn't do that any longer. And that's sort of how it started for me. And then thank God for Google.
You know, I want to tip my hat to you for listening to that voice, because so many women, and I was guilty of this, quiet that voice and even tell myself what somebody told you, like, oh girl, but look at what you have, look at where you are, this is the thing,
Yeah.
you know, like, so even though there was a part of me saying, this ain't it, you know, sometimes I blame it on being practical or whatever, but then I would be quick to say, but you know, this is what people do, like you said about people looking at from the outside looking in, you had made it.
Yeah.
So, you know, they dismissed that voice that you were hearing. And I'm proud of you after the fact that you didn't. Any idea why you didn't?
Oh, thanks. I mean, first off, thank you. Yeah. Why I didn't was, I mean, that's an amazing question. I would say it's not just one reason why I didn't. I'd say it was several. So, like, when I was younger, I've kind of always had like a knack for writing, right? And I can actively remember, like, hear the voices of like my instructors going like, if you wrote this, because like, listen, they wouldn't even believe I wrote it. I'm like, I'm just gonna take that as a compliment. I'm not gonna get hurt by this. But they'd be like, if you wrote this, like really wrote this, then like you need to follow this. Like this is what you should be doing. And then also hearing like well-meaning people in my life that love me dearly and want the best and want my security, my parents going, girl, you cannot make a living doing writing, right? So one of the things that came back to me was like, I went to school for literature and I went to school to do something with that. And then me following this path and like kind of being stuck in an office now, like under fluorescent lighting and like, you know, like not being able to do what I was going to do, like that knock that had started when I was a kid, like I'd like quieted down for a little bit, but it started knocking in harder and harder. So one of the things I would have to say is like, it was me also like restarting the journey of like finding myself again, like the person that I was when I was a kid before I started listening to anyone, no matter how much I loved them or how much I thought their advice was, before I started listening to any of those outside voices instead of listening to my intuition. So it's like the more I started to just like kind of lean into those projects and spend more time doing that, like what started off as a spark, like grew and grew from there. So that would be the biggest thing. And also having people in my corner that would listen. So for every like, you know, handful of people I would talk to that just didn't get it, I was lucky enough to have like a couple people that are in my closest circle that I would say like, you know, either they were blood or just people that have become family and friends that listened enough to go, you know what, I think you're right. I don't know how you're going to do it either, but I say listen to that voice. So it was a mixture of my own intuition and like having someone else around and like starting to like go to like these like Facebook groups that had other copywriters in there and like just reaching out to them and go, listen, I've heard some things, but is this really true? Like, are you really living out there? Are you really eating? Like, are you just eating ramen? Like, what's really going on? And starting to connect with those people. And I realized it was possible. but it took some like convincing.
That one decision right there puts you ahead of the game so much, because again, so many women, they don't go back to find themselves, find the version of themselves that they lost before they started listening to other people. Like you said,
Yeah.
it usually takes them 20 years. It takes 40 years. It takes like an entire lifetime. And that you were able to cut that out and do it then. Oh my gosh, girl, that's incredible. Again, like I said,
Yeah.
I'm after the fact, I'm proud for you. Uh, you knew that you wanted to write, you wanted to use the thing that you were passionate about that you were not using in that 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Now, were you always someone who was into travel? Because it's kind of a jump to say, I want to do this, but I want to do this in foreign countries. So like, how do we get there?
Okay, so the foreign country bit thing too. You're right. So my parents are originally from Jamaica. So like the most amount of traveling I did would be like to go back to Jamaica, and not to experience it like a tourist. Nah, I was going back and staying with my grandma in my grandmother's house. So I had that little bit of travel experience. And then I was kind of like somebody who couldn't help but just be a busybody in school. So they'd be like, oh, we need another person to join this club. And I'd be like, I'm there. I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but I'm there. Sure, yeah, I'll make room. So I would get travel experience through a lot of the activities I was in, but they were mainly in the United States. The biggest reason why, like the biggest two reasons I'd say why I decided it was time to like leave and expand my borders was one, I was always really interested in learning Spanish. And I actually minored in school. And I had so bad wanted to go and do like a study abroad. And I was like saving up my little coins and stuff like that for that. And then like my senior year or something, like my parents ended up having to do some repairs on the house. And like whatever I wasn't paying for school, like they were able, like with scholarships and stuff like that, they'd help me out in. And like all these little coins, like I was saving or got scholarships for to do that study abroad. I was like, you know what, like y'all have done enough. Like y'all take this and I'll figure it out. So that the dream was deferred for a little bit, right? And I had thought like indefinitely, but I still had it in my back of my pocket. And all your professors tell you, if you want to learn, after a while, you got to take your head out the book and put your body in a place where people are always speaking the language. And so that was kind of still haunting me a little bit. And then the second thing was, listen, girl, I was living pretty well. I had a pretty decent, like I said, I was a director. I had like, you know, pretty good paycheck. I ain't gonna like lie. But it took a lot of effort for me to like maintain the lifestyle that I had become accustomed to, right? And when I started watching all of like these digital nomad videos and stuff like that, one thing I loved about them is the ones that did like their content really well is they would show you how much it costs to live the way they lived. And when I saw the standard of living I could achieve abroad and get what I wanted, which was a language immersion, get all these opportunities to like, you know, enjoy things that like I maybe couldn't even afford to enjoy it like at that moment when I was living in the States, and not have to be like busting my butt to do it at a job that I don't really even identify with anymore. I could do this and survive as a writer and figure it out. Like that was sealed for me. I was like, okay. I was like, you mean, how much does an Airbnb cost here? How much did they say food costs here? Why am I like busting my butt so hard to try and like struggle and make it in these streets in the States when I could like be living lavishly, the life I'm supposed to live, like, and do it abroad and have more time in my calendar now because I just have more hours back in the day to pour back into my craft. So like that last final piece was a no-brainer for me, and I was like, okay, it's time. I gotta leave. Like it's been fun, but like there's more for me out there than there is where I was at that moment.
So let's talk about some of that kind of transparency that resonated with you. Let's talk about that. So you are a copywriter. You do digital marketing. What does that mean? Okay, because I'm asking because what happens is, and I see this all the time, like my expertise is in teaching, education, training. So if somebody asks a question about that in a group, I'm on it. But I can't help people as well when they ask about like, other professions outside of education because they want to
Mhm.
go abroad. And then people will drop in there like, oh, you could do digital marketing, but that's where they leave it. And
Mhm.
if you are one of the uninitiated, you're kind of like, well, yeah, I can Google that, but before that, like, help me out. Like, what the hell
Mhm.
is that?
Got it. Yes, of course, sure. I didn't even know what copywriting was the first time I heard about it, and like I completely understand. So for all these people who like, let's just make this really simple because people like throwing like that word around. Like copy is honestly like any amount of words you see on a screen when you go on the internet. It's not even on the internet alone. Let's be honest. Like your copy could be like your new newsletters. Copy can be like newspapers and things like that. So a copywriter is really just anybody that produces written content. So it's a broad spectrum. What I do specifically, when I started out in copywriting, I was blogging because that's one form of copywriting. Because you're just writing content for a blog as opposed to like a magazine or something like that. And I actually started off in the natural hair and like beauty space. And it was like it was a way for me to like scratch like two itches. Like I was like newly natural and like was learning everything myself. So it's a way for me to do research for my clients, but also do research for myself and figure out what works for me and what doesn't. So that's sort of like the copywriting portion. And through like through the like last couple of year that I was like working as a copywriter, I've expanded and changed my niche a little bit. I still have like some clients that I work for like within like the like natural hair and beauty space, but now I'm working a lot more with in the health space. So I do like writing for apps. So like say for instance you have like a weight loss app, so like something to help you like lose weight in like 30 days or whatever. Like somebody's got to write what you're supposed to do every day. That's my job, right? So so that's one thing I do. I do a lot of like ghost writing too for clinicians. So I have like a gynecologist that I work for. Like a lot of times you'll see like all these websites and all these blogs that are run by these doctors. They don't have time to do all that. 9 times out of 10, they're hiring somebody like me who's a ghostwriter. And depending on how that relationship works, they might just give you a couple of ideas of what they want to see in a month for their blog. And then it's your job to go run and do the rest and like create the content and everything with their voice that they want to see. And then they put it up on their website. So that's the copywriting aspect. And then in terms of digital marketing, that is even broader. Like, surprisingly, I found like the two broadest fields to work in. And that could be any sort of content. So it's not just written content. It could be like photos. So like I help I partner with a lot of digital marketing agencies. You know, I have my hands in like a bunch of different piles, and all that together helps me like make it through a month with enough for savings and enough to spend and live the life I live. So like my agency partnership, I might be like running her content marketing blog while she gets more clients and helps them run her agency. And then I also might be running her Instagram. So the writing of the blog, some people might consider that like the copywriting portion, whereas like me creating like her memes for like her business and like having like, you know, some writing, you know, not a lot for an IG post or something like that. Like all that side is more the digital marketing aspect, but you can do anything. What I do is I do a lot of social blogging and emailing, and that's email like newsletter type stuff for my clients. And like my biggest, which I spend the most time on in a week, is I'll build out a whole website for the client along with like running their blog. So then that's all like writing all their landing pages. What's your homepage sound like? About me. What are your frequently asked questions going to sound like? I'm gathering testimonials from their like past clients. So I could also add that to the website somewhere. And if you can do both, I always say that it's best to be able to like build the website as well as write the content that goes on the website. So I find like I get the most pleasure out of like linking with clients like that, where I have almost all my hands on every part of the process as opposed to just one part. So I know I just said a lot. Did that seem clear?
No, that was fabulous. I have never, and I mean, like I have literally Googled those things, but that's probably the best explanation I've ever gotten. So no,
Okay, good.
that was perfect. That was perfect.
And like, just to reiterate too, you can do several things like within both of those large umbrellas. That's just what I do. But I know people do all kinds of things and call themselves the same thing that I call myself. But what we look like in a day and what we do in a day is very different.
Now, speaking of titles and what you call yourself, do you ever refer to yourself as a digital nomad?
Oh, that's funny. I mean, I do. It feels, I don't know, it kind of feels a little weird to say. So like sometimes, you know, when you're meeting someone new, it just pops out. You surprise yourself what you say. So and normally when I do it, I don't even expect that I'm going to do it. Like if I have to like write an intro for a website, all of a sudden I'm like, well, digital nomad is a quick term you could use. Or I find I use it a lot. I probably call myself a digital nomad the most when I'm actually not nomading. Like when I'm back at home and like people are asking me what I do for a living and all that kind of stuff. That's probably when I use it the most. When I'm actually out and about, you normally, if you're speaking to like another person that speaks English, and they're also traveling, they're either on vacation or they're also a nomad too. So you tend to not have to like identify yourself that way because you can tell normally within about like a couple of minutes of meeting someone whether or not they're on vacation or they like, you know, live and work there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a interesting term because it kind of encapsulates the lifestyle. It
Yes.
really isn't a term about like what you do for a living because nobody pays you to be a nomad. But
No,
it
at
it
least
is
not yet.
yeah, not yet. But it does encapsulate what the lifestyle is like. And like you said, when you're at home in the States and people are trying to figure out like where do you live? Like why don't you live in one
Yes.
place and why don't you have a car? You know, those kinds of things.
I'd say like even the more accurate term for how like I or how my partner and I do it is like we're kind of like slow mads. Like some people I know will only spend like a week in a place and before I know what they've done, hopped on a plane to the other side of the world. That's not me, no ma'am. I've got way too much to do, and also I don't have the energy. So like what we'll do is we'll stay at a place for like 3 months or maybe even 6 months, like wear out the visa, the traveling visa. Like that's probably what we're gonna be doing in Mexico now. So it's not as quick as a lot of digital nomads move. It's kind of like, that's why we say like, we're kind of like slow mads, not really digital nomads.
I could not even fathom in a week. I mean, like
Yeah.
well, the last time I traveled right before I came back to China for the pandemic, I was in Europe and I hit like 10 countries in a month. And the whole time I was bitching about how much I hate this. Like, you know, you don't like to travel like this. Why did you book this trip this way? And it was because I
Right.
was being greedy. I wanted to hit as many countries as possible, but no, I'm more of a serial expat than
Yeah.
a nomad because I really can't be about that life. So if somebody's listening to what you have described and they're like, that sounds like something that I want to do or some version of that.
Mhm.
What skill do you think is like the most necessary or for them to be successful in doing something along those lines?
So I would say the skill that covers both aspects, I say like my work life and like my home life, would be like refining the ability to teach yourself. Because when I'm working with my clients, whom I love dearly, like they can't necessarily tell me how to do everything that they want me to do in like a call. Like sometimes like it'll just be like, like the first time I ever did like social media, I was working with another type of client and we were just doing blogging. They're like, well, what do you know about social media marketing? I was like, I'll be honest with you, not much, sis. I have my own Facebook, but I'm willing to learn. And they're like, that sounds good to me. Let's get started. And then they hung up and then went about their business to run their to run their part of the company. And it was my job to figure out how do I become a social media marketer? Like, I don't know, within the next couple of weeks so I can get this ball rolling. And if I wasn't able to like hone the ability to like find my own resources, find my own people to talk to ask questions, and then have a little bit of gumption to just finesse the rest out and like I'll learn along the way. I don't know how much of it I would have be able to pull off. And like the same thing with like traveling around the world. Like being able to like figure out where you're going to live, how you're going to get there. It requires a lot of you figuring it out on your own, unless you're going to be using a travel agent for all that. And realistically, none of us do. You just kind of got to take up the mantle to like basically be your own teacher and be your own guide for the most part. And it's scary, but the more you use it, it's just like a muscle. Like the more you exercise it, the better you'll be at it. But that's by far the most important skill.
That's a surprising answer. It makes complete sense, but it's not what I expected you to say. Not that I really knew what I expected you to say. But you just said something about a travel agent. Like, we don't use travel agents. People who tend to live abroad or travel quite a bit, that sort of thing, we don't. Why do you think that is?
Oh, good question. I think that there is just a stereotype about when and why you need a travel agent. And I think the stereotype is you do that for vacations, you do that for big things. And I think like there's also a mindset that kind of goes along with the people who decide to do any type of what we're doing, like where they decide to do like the serial expat life, the nomad life or whatever. Like there's a gumption I feel about those folks where it's almost like they're like, I got this. Even if you don't got this, like you trust that you got this and you'll figure it out.
No, you're right. Because I'm sitting here thinking like, yep, like I'll just do it. And whether I know what I'm doing or not, I'll just figure it out. And yeah, I think you're right there. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Now, your lifestyle, the kind of work you're doing, basically, you're an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Did you always consider yourself to be entrepreneurial?
Oh, it depends on how I feel that day. Some days I feel like I am, first off, I don't even deserve what I'm doing right now. Why do y'all keep trusting me to do this stuff every day, right? And there's other days where I feel like I'm top of the world and I'm a boss and I have my own business. I'm going to be looking into this. I want to start an agency and all that kind of stuff. So it's not so much like the overall like umbrella thought, like, yes, sure, I identify as an entrepreneur. But like some days I wake up and I'm just writing this project to get it done. And I'm a writer that day. I'm not like a businesswoman. And then another day when I've got tons of invoices I got to get done, I've got emails to catch up on, like then I might feel more like that entrepreneurial thing because it's less of the creative and it's more of like the business management. So it can depend on the hour, the day, the month, how I identify. But overall, yeah, you kind of got to be an entrepreneur to do this.
How do you get clients?
Oh, good question. I ask myself that too. Like,
well, I'm asking because this is what people want to know.
Yeah.
You know?
My most, I would say, consistent way of getting clients is through a freelancing job site called Upwork. That's honestly where I started. That's where I get most of my relationships from, even now. Okay, so they will tell you you're supposed to keep everything on platform and all that kind of stuff. But most of the long-term clients that I have like get to a point where they want to move off the platform. But still, even while I might not be using Upwork to maintain that business relationship, I found them on Upwork. So they count to me as an Upwork client. Even though we might be using some other way to like handle our projects from there. I have heard things like people are like, oh yeah, I can get stuff on LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. It just hasn't worked for me, at least not yet. I'll get more relationships that way. So the biggest would be Upwork, and then like second would probably be word of mouth. So you do a really good job and like you tend to work in a circle and like it or not, professionals are always peeking at like what they consider their friendly competition. So say you start working, I do a lot of like SEO, which is like search engine optimization. So writing content to make sure that like your website shows up higher when someone tries to Google something about your website. So if someone's trying to like find the best shoes in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and you sell shoes, part of my job will be making sure that when they Google shoes in Fort Lauderdale, you come up like on the first page, hopefully the first like query, right? Like her other shoe competitors are going to be looking, at where they stand in terms of the Google ranking too. So sometimes it'll just be like, hey girl, who are you working with? Because I saw your website looks different. I see all this stuff happening and stuff. And like, Luckily I tend to work with really great people, like, you know, where there's no like it's healthy competition, but no one's like trying to like, you know, keep anyone from winning. So like my clients will pass me on and be like, oh, she was great, I loved her, I used her for this, you could try her out. And then also like another big way is connecting with other freelancers. So like I'll share projects. Like I have a couple of projects that my boyfriend and I work on together, where like I might do the content and he does the editing, or he might have a client that wants like heavy copywriting work and he'll send it over to me and all that kind of stuff. So a mixture of Upwork, word of mouth, and trading jobs with other freelancers, and all that together sort of gets the whole job thing taken care of for now.
When you made this decision, like to go out after this particular lifestyle, your parents, your family, they were cool with that?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say cool is like an interesting adjective to use. Like I have my dad specifically, I love him dearly, but he was one of those voices that was like, girl, why? You have made it. What are you doing? And like my parents are like, they're Jamaican immigrants. So
that's what I was going to say. They're from the islands. They're immigrants. I wouldn't think this would go over well.
Yeah, but like to them, I was like, it almost seemed like initially at first I was throwing away this whole dream that I had, you know, like they talk about like a relationship escalator or something. I was kind of like on the job escalator, and they're like, why are you getting off right now? You were at the top of your game. My sister, whom I love, I only have one sibling. She's 8 years older than me. She's a social worker. We've always been tight. The first time I told her that, and I was like, I don't know, it could have also been how I delivered it, because I was lit. Like I was so excited. She could just like see the passion and the excitement in my eyes. We were at a Chili's, you know, there were also some margaritas, so I could have helped. She saw it and she was like, girl, go for it. And she was like behind me, like full of force. Let's say my parents, it took them a little bit you know, fully accept it. Now they love it. Now they love talking about it. They love hearing me like, hey guys, I got a new client, or check out this new project, send them a link. Like I did this and all that kind of stuff. They're there for it now. And like, I think the biggest concern for them is they just wanted me to be like safe and secure and have the like financial stability. So once they saw like those things were like in the works, like they kind of like, okay, we're good now. And also it helped that I wasn't going completely alone. Otherwise, I think they would have been like, oh my God, and she's doing this all by herself. Jesus, help me, I'm coming. Like, but it took a little bit. And like, I would have to say too, within like the first couple of months of me being abroad, I actually got into an accident in Spain that I know was hard for my whole family, because I was on the other side of the world. And I was like, you know, I had to go to a hospital and all this kind of stuff, had to like get dental work redone, and all these things were happening. And I think that moment, like us going through that together as a family, and then me coming all the way back out on the other side, and then seeing like, you know, I'm still standing, and like now my smile looks better than it did before. Like, I think that too helped as well. So, you know, now we're all good.
When we were talking before about your decision to stay in Mexico, or rather not return to the US, you mentioned healthcare.
Yes.
And you were in this accident. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with healthcare outside the United States? This may seem like kind of a rando thing to ask about, but there are people who, or at least in my experience, I've come across who want to go abroad, but they're still in that phase where they're talking themselves out of it. And sometimes one of the things that they'll say is, you know, like, I don't know if I can trust the doctors, or, you know, like, are they up to the level that the United States is? So, you know, you made a pretty big life choice, I think, and you based it on staying in Mexico during the pandemic, and you based it on your ability to afford healthcare. And then you were in an accident and you had to, you know, interact and take part in healthcare in another country.
Okay, so First off, healthcare, and this is also my mom is a healthcare worker in the States, so I feel like kind of bad like saying this, but healthcare that I've experienced outside of the country was absolutely amazing, like top notch. When my initial accident happened, like long story short, I was on like a motor scooter and I ended up like we were just going down a hill and I went down a hill too fast. So I ended up getting to the accident that way. And I had chipped like three of my front teeth in the process, along with like, you know, some like scratches and bumps. But like the dental work was the most, I say, pressing part of all of that. Like even when I was at my job in the States and like they took great care of me, I did not have dental. Um, so when we actually got into the accident in Spain, we still had not found out about the digital nomad insurance and started that out. So everything was going to be coming out of pocket for us. So at the time, I did not do a lot of groundwork for this because like when it happened late at night. So first it was just get home, get some ice and like make sure, you know, there isn't anything too crazy going on. But the very next day, like into the night, the very next day, there were like resources online. Like basically my boyfriend was looking up like what are good quality hospitals in the area and all that sort of stuff. And we went to a private hospital in Spain. We went there. There was absolutely no wait. You know how you go to an emergency room and you will be there for hours without even being seen? We were in and out. The whole process maybe took an hour.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and so we were waiting for about 5 minutes. And the entire staff was incredibly sweet. And that was like just to work with the hospital. The doctor, like we met in a private room. They walked me through everything. She did a full physical, paid for it out of pocket. Not even, I don't even remember. The amount was so small, intelligible. I'll have to check. I can send it to you. You can put it in the show notes later if you like. Because I keep all that stuff somewhere. And then when it came time for the dentist, and she also spoke English.
Because that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, y'all did all this in Spanish?
well, that was the funny part. So the lady at the front desk, she did not speak English, but we had enough Spanish that we were able to make it through. And the doctor who saw me right after the accident, so like 6 hours later or whatever, she spoke English. She checked me out enough to know like there's no like everything that looks like it happened was superficial, while it might hurt excruciatingly, like set me up and all that kind of stuff. I walked into a pharmacy. Pharmacy was quick and easy too. Everything was incredibly like affordable. I was also able to get stuff like this is kind of side topic, but my birth control was not covered in the States. In Mexico and in every other Latin American country I visited, I can just walk into something that's like a CVS or like a Walmart and get birth control. I could actually have it delivered to my house, which is what I do now because, you know, I'm kind of lazy. And it's like the pack I'm using now, I think is like, what, $10 for a month? So that's beside the point, but just give you that as an option. And then when it came time for the dental work to be done, I had all three teeth. Again, this doctor spoke entirely in English, although he was Latin American, and he actually did a lot of schooling in the States as well. So one of the things we talked about when I could talk again was about like how different the costs are, and like when he goes and talks to his like contemporaries in the States when they meet up for conferences. Again, everybody's so flabbergasted as to how much we have to pay in the States for dental work. Same thing, we could pay for everything out of pocket. I think all three like teeth didn't even cost more than $1,000 to get done. And again, in and out. I didn't have to wait for a long time. Everything was fixed, and I was good to go. And then he even invited us to go to like his friend's restaurant the day, like later on that evening, because like we ended up like, you know, just chopping it up afterwards. So like all in all, like I could not speak highly enough of the experiences I've had with like healthcare professionals and just the entire system, like than I can outside of the States. Like there were no hidden fees. We knew exactly what we were paying for. Like I just
people are because I try to explain like some of my choices are centered on healthcare costs because I don't like the idea that I could go to the doctor once and be bankrupted. And so, you know, when I'm around other foreigners who are not from the US and we talk about costs, and I said, well, you know, a lot of things you just don't know until after the fact.
Yeah.
when they give you the bill how much it's going to cost you. And that's a whole nother thing, you know.
Yeah. And they were transparent the whole way. Like, we knew before how much it was going to be. I think when we went to the hospital, we didn't know initially. And then when we got the bill, we laughed. We're like, are you kidding me? This is how much this was. And then, but when we went to the dentist, they told us everything that they thought would, how it would be. And to the penny, that's how it was. And no, like, skin off our bones. I didn't have to break into savings or anything like that. Like, when the accident initially happened, I thought that was honestly going to be the end of like this whole little fun digital nomad journey. Like, oh great, like this is it. Now we got to go back to the States and recoup and find boring jobs and all that kind of stuff. And how easily and seamlessly it all went down, I was shocked. I was pleasantly surprised.
And this was before you even had insurance.
Yes, we paid for everything out of pocket. And I would say maybe the grand total, so this is the doctor's visit, the dentist, like maybe everything then broke 1,000, if I'm right. But that would not happen.
No, because I've had dental work done in the United States, and no, not even close. You had this moment where you thought, okay, this is it. We're going to have to go back to America. We're going to have to rebuild. We're going to have to take boring jobs. Do you have plans? Like, do you see this lifestyle as something temporary, or do you see now your life being abroad?
I would say, like, where we stand now is we probably won't be doing like, I would say, like, the goal is find a home base. So our next stint, when we were going to start picking up travel again, when it came before COVID and all that kind of stuff, was going to be, where do we want our home base to be? So initially, when we visited Medellin, I thought, like, this will be a nice home base. So maybe spend part of the year here and then find another place to spend another part of the year, and then travel when you feel like it for vacations, right? But still probably staying outside the States. Then we came to Mexico and I was like, oh no, honey, this is it. This is home base. So I would say, like, big picture, I want to quote unquote settle down, in the sense that, like, if I could put a little finca somewhere, I'm like growing my own food. I got nice land. I can invite people to come visit me, like all that kind of stuff. Like, that's the ideal. And then that'd be probably like one, like space that I would call home. And then the next space would probably be more like a city life. So maybe going like back to like Medellin, but like staying in Poblado or something, and having like a home there as well. So most likely, like, the only time we'd probably be going back to the States, unless something changed, would just really be to visit family. Like, I kind of feel like I've seen what I wanted to see there for now. My family brings me back there, but like it's something weird. And I know, and maybe you can speak to this, like, too, being somebody that traveled, like, I didn't expect that I'd be able to find home outside of the States until I found it. And I was like, oh, so why am I going back? And yeah, so we're probably going to be, I don't know if we'll be traveling as frequently, but we'll definitely probably be just out and about. And
people, I guess I'm a little fanatical about Mexico City.
Oh, I love it.
Literally my favorite place in the world. And it's, I had been to other parts of Mexico and I was like, I'm over Mexico. Like, I don't ever need to come back here. And I remember saying, well, I'd probably visit Mexico City. And then when I moved abroad initially, I moved to Honduras.
Okay.
And it was okay. You know, it did what it was supposed to do. And I was looking for my next move, and it was really out of Medellin and Mexico City. And the way things worked out, long story short, I ended up in Mexico City. And literally, I was like, this is the place I'm supposed to be.
Yes.
You know, like, and I definitely wasn't necessary. I was country shopping. Like, I knew I needed to leave the U.S. Because it wasn't the place for me. I just didn't fit there. My values, none of that stuff really matched. And so I didn't necessarily think I could find a country or a place that did. But what I have noticed is, since I have been out of Mexico, since I've been out of Mexico City, like, if I get a chance to talk about Mexico City with somebody, I you can't shut me up, you know? So
Right.
it's like, okay, obviously this is an important place for you to be,
Yeah.
which is where I'm trying my damnedest to get back to, but the pandemic and the Chinese government are not going to make that easy for me. I very much consider Mexico City to be my second home, and wherever I end up, that'll probably be a place that I, you know, go back to, if not a home base, very, very close to that.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Do you think that, you know, like given your age, and there's always a lot of talk about millennials and basically that the boomers and Gen X, well, I'm Gen X, so I'm not going to blame us, but the boomers basically screwed up things, and y'all are having to bear the brunt of that. And, you know, here you have now created this life that, quote unquote, gives you the American dream, but it's not in America.
Yes.
And do you think, like, I don't know, is there a connection there between, like, for your generation, is it maybe that they just won't find the American dream in America? Maybe they need to broaden their horizons? Or is it that because of that situation, your age group is more open to exploring and looking for your happiness elsewhere?
I think it's a little bit of that, and I actually think it's not just limited to my age group when it comes to you're not going to get the American dream in America anymore. Like a lot of people we run across are Xers and boomers as well, who were either close to retirement or in retirement and found out like very quickly that the type of life they thought had been promised to them after like sticking it out and, you know, grinding was snatched. So someone took it. We don't know who, but if we want to retire now, right, we just can't do it in America, or at least not like we thought we would have when we started this journey. So I think it's not necessarily just my age group, even though I definitely think that the more millennials that become hip to this, the more we're going to see out there. I think it's something for, honestly, everyone across the age spectrum who is like looking for a sense of security and and they're not afraid to step out of the States to make that happen. Because I'll get people all the time that's like, oh, that sounds great, but ooh, I could never do that. And it's like, I mean, it's not as So yeah, I think the people who decide that sounds great and let me see and lean in, like I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised at what they find. And those are the people it's for. So it's not necessarily an age group.
Well, it's funny you said looking for security, and generally speaking, the common idea is that choosing a life like you have, creating that kind of life, is the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's funny. And like it took me rethinking before I left the States about the whole idea of security. Like, so I realized like Florida, where I was working, was a right to work state, which sounds like it's a good thing for the worker, but it's actually not.
No,
what that means is, well, yeah. So for your listeners, I don't know who don't know this, that means that your employer can fire you at any time and not even give you a reason, and you have no recourse, right? So in a lot of ways, like the people I found who thought that they had security in their jobs, like it's actually not that secure. Like you can be fired, especially if you live in a state like that. And the people who like normally, like the gift that gets packaged as a 9-to-5 life makes it where a lot of people don't have side hustles, right? So you've got one job. So like in my mind now, I've got one client that I stake everything on. And at any point in time, there's no contract saying you have to keep me for a certain amount or not. At any point in time, you could cut me off at the knees and then I have to start over. To me, that is the exact opposite of security. Like the way I live now, I've got several clients. If one client tells me they got to go, perfect, that's fine. We'll be able to like recover. And I've gotten to the point now where I can wash, rinse, repeat, sell myself, find another client, and keep everything running within like in a couple of weeks, like the max, right? To me, that is security. Honing the skill of being able to find your way around the world, be able to use a map, all these sorts of things that I wouldn't have had to like have like worked on or like harnessed in my old life. are actually giving me like immense amounts of security, whereas what I thought was security in my old life was not at any means.
Well, what you have now is you are in control of your destiny.
Exactly, right?
And there's a great deal of security in that, because you are no longer at the whim of someone else calling the shot. This has been an incredible conversation. It really has. I'm so appreciative that you were willing to come and share and be so transparent, because I think what you have had to say is going to help a lot of women. I really believe that.
Yes.
If somebody wanted to connect with you or just follow your journey, how would they do that?
So you can always find me on Facebook. Just Google my name, Ashlee Mcclimett. That's one way. I've got a LinkedIn profile. I'm also pretty active so you can always find me there too. Those are like the main ones. I try to get into Instagram, but it's really just for my clients. Maybe one day it'll catch on. But those would be the two main ways you can find me, on Facebook or probably on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening. And a special thank you to those of you who've left reviews of the podcast on, Apple, Google, Spotify, and all of the other podcatchers. That is much appreciated. If you like the work that I'm doing here, leaving a review of the show is an easy way to show your support and appreciation. I also want to give an extra special shout out to those who have signed up on Anchor to be a monthly patron of the show. I cannot tell you how beyond grateful I am for your support. If you're interested in supporting the pod with a small financial contribution, you can do that. There is a link in the description. If you want Ashlee's Facebook and her LinkedIn, or you want information about the insurance she mentioned, you can check out the show notes, which are on the Picky Girl Travels the world.com/podcast -2. There's also a link to that in the description. Thanks again. See y'all next week. I've been known to fly by the seat of my pants from time to time. But my guest this week could teach a master class on how to wing it and how to fly by the seat of your pants. People always talk about, what's that quote? When you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I mean, admittedly, I think I may have even told that to a student or two over the years. But after talking to my guest this week, Carrie Von Ethridge, I have an entirely new level of appreciation for the art of winging it. She is an artist and a self-described cultural provocateur. And after you listen to her episode, you'll understand that she definitely deserves that title and then some. Carrie was incredibly honest and transparent about her experiences living in Spain, sometimes illegally, and what it was like to work there. One of the reasons I wanted to share her story with y'all was because, as I've been saying, everybody's path isn't going to look the same. Okay. And that's important. We're not all going to be expats. We're not all going to start our own business. None of that matters. But what is important is that you make choices so that you can live the life that you want and so that you can live life on your terms. And that's what Carrie's story is all about. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to Carrie's blog and her IG account, along with information for some of those programs she mentioned about how to teach English in Spain. I'd like to say thank you to all of you who have left reviews of the podcast. That is much appreciated. If you like the work that I'm doing here, please leave a review of the show. That is an easy way to show your support and appreciation wherever you happen to be listening to the show, because it's on, I know, at least 8 different podcast platforms. I want to give an extra special shout out to those of you who signed up on Anchor to be a monthly patron of the show. I am extremely grateful for your support. It helps keep this all going. If you are interested in supporting the podcast with a small financial contribution, and when I say small, it can be as little as $1 a month. You can do that by using the link in the description. It will take you to the podcast page on Anchor, and you can sign up to support. Thanks again, everybody. Talk to y'all next week.